My name is Comyn, for those who don't know me. I'm the head of offshore technology with OEG, based down in Lowestoft, and we provide a variety of technological services across the offshore sector. We've got communication systems, we've got we call it monitoring and surveillance, we've got CCTVs, terrestrial health monitoring, and we have a fairly broad metocean offering. My background is in metocean. I'm an oceanographer by training, had a career over the last 20 years working as an oceanographic engineer all across the world, various locations, various sites, various sectors. But today I am going to talk to you about quality and continuity of offshore communications and data. And we'll just sort of have a little bit of a discussion really on the importance of that quality and continuity throughout the life cycle of an offshore wind farm development. Each one of these squares here really represents a presentation all to its own. Every single phase could have a whole presentation, a whole day dedicated to it. So just bear that in mind really. I'm going to skim through this quite quickly. There's various little things that I'm going to touch on, but the whole point really is just to make it clear why it's so important to have that continuity and that quality from start to finish, starting with development. And what I've picked on there really is communication systems. So development is so much more than that. It's site characterization and it's site survey, and for our purposes, what I'm talking about here is actually setting up a communication system. Now, in the early stages, before there's anything out there, we have to be able to understand the site and how we're going to model that data, model that communication across the site to make sure we've got that continuity. Same goes for construction. You're in blue water, there is no infrastructure in place, there's no communications networks, so you have to have some other means of data telemetry to get that data from the offshore environment back to the end user, whether or not you're in a control room or whether you're a data scientist working with the engineering teams. And then as you progress onto the operations and maintenance, these are often safety critical systems, so that quality and continuity is vital to ensure that operations, whether it's the movement of people or vessels or goods, is crystal clear. As you progress into the life of the offshore development, you've got the considerations of life extension. You need data-driven decisions, and if the data that you've got is not of the highest quality, then you can guarantee that the decisions that you make are not going to be much good to you. You've got to have a decent and sort of informed planned and preventative maintenance schedule, and there's an integration of all the systems I'm going to talk about really in that life extension, and then finally at the end of life and decommissioning. Again, it's a culmination of everything that I'm going to talk about through the life to make sure that you've got safe, efficient and compliant operations. So the blue water challenges. So when you get to site in the early stages and there's nothing there. Now, to have that continuity of communications from the control rooms onshore, you might recognise this as the east of England, and the propagation model here is showing the extent of where those communications are going to get to and where the development site is offshore. So what you've got here is a gap. You do not have continuity of communications on this lower model. So what you have to do is to ensure that you've got a higher mast that you can put your antennas on, you get a greater range from your radio communication system, and you may also have to have multiple vessels on your site so you can relay that communication from shore to ship and from ship to shore. So we model that in early stages, so as we know full well that when vessels do go out, we've got full coverage. It's a safety critical system, so to have that coverage from day one is essential. On to construction. When we actually start getting multiple vessels out there, we get large SOVs, we get multiple CTVs, and we'll have teams, all of whom need to communicate. We also have data buoys at this stage that we're going to be relaying data from site back to shore, again for the likes of managing the operations. So if you've got vessels that are leaving a location that's many hours away, you need to ensure that they're going to get to site and it's going to be workable. The limits can be let's say 1.5 meters for a vessel, and well, as soon as you exceed that, as soon as you're into 1.6, 1.7 meters, you can no longer work, and if you're sending vessels out, it can be incredibly costly. So having these buoys on site and having that continuity of the data from site to shore means that you can effectively manage all operations, and they pay for themselves almost immediately. As soon as you start having vessels that aren't sailing and failing, these things pay for themselves. It's also worth saying as well that these aids to navigation here, they're actually a license requirement on the site. So having them on site and maintaining that continuity around the site is actually a license requirement, and we often have to have 99% uptime on these buoys, otherwise you're in breach of your license. So to make sure that you do have that continuity of data, continuity of the service that's provided by these buoys, we have to have a pretty good understanding of the environment they're going into, so that the moorings can be modelled and we can design them effectively, because what you don't want is to have an over-engineered mooring, because then the buoys don't perform. So if a data buoy has got a heavy mooring, it won't perform, it'll be suppressed, you won't get decent wave data. If the moorings are under-designed on the ATONs and they break free, you've now got a break in your license, and well, from our point of view, it's not acceptable just on our quality of service, but it's not acceptable on the license requirements. One of the things to say that at the bottom point is about data security, which I'll come on to later with regards to cyber threat. But for the purposes of this slide, it's about the actual physical loss of your data. If you don't have that continuous data that's rolling in, then the information that you're receiving is never going to be the best and most up-to-date data. So that continuity, that data security, absolutely vital for all operations during the construction phase. On to O&M. There's the integration challenges next, which really come down to the network and information security legislation that exists and the various frameworks that need to be in place to ensure that you've got a secure system, so you're not going to fall foul of cyber threats. You know, there's been plenty of cases in the news recently where large organisations have fallen foul, and their organisations have lost many days and often weeks and hundreds of millions of dollars worth of revenues because of having inadequate security measures in place. All of these systems typically are networked, but not from day one. So we need to be able to have a dual system whereby you've got these sensors, and what you can see here is a wave radar system and a MET station on that pole mount there. And again, that informs control rooms on what the site conditions are like. It'll give you real-time wave data, real-time weather data, and they need to have this dual setup whereby they're self-contained, so you can have a self-powered and a system that will send data ashore before these systems get fully commissioned. But then when they are commissioned, we actually integrate that data into the SCADA networks or into the infrastructure that the client will have in place. So to do that, it needs to be compliant with what's the NIS2 regulations. It's NIS 2018 in the UK, and it's soon to be replaced with the UK Security and Cyber Resilience Bill that's currently going through the House of Commons right now. And basically what it sets out is that organisations that have got, or energy providers really, that have got a commitment to delivering energy to a certain number of homes, and I forget the exact number, has to be compliant because it's of national importance. Now, we're not bound by the NIS regulations, but as a supply chain partner, we make sure that we are compliant with it. We have the ISO 27001 accreditation, and we actually implement the IEC 62443 framework to ensure that we've got all of the resilience, all of the hardening of our systems, all of the sort of the multi-factor authentication, the individualization of access, just to ensure that we don't fall foul to any cyber threat. All of us can. I mean, it's sort of a word of warning really to everybody, is to be very aware of this, because by coming through there can be these multi-layer attacks that then go to the next layer, to the next layer, to the next layer, until it gets into the system, and before you know it, a system can go down, and then with a a wind farm that is of national importance. That's obviously unacceptable. Now it kind of looks like I'm making too much of a deal of the fact that we're integrating our data into the SCADA networks here, but any way in could be a threat. So it's something that I think everybody probably in this room needs to be aware of, that these regulations and these standards that we need to work to are of vital importance to maintaining this quality and continuity. The life extension really is something that I want to talk about with regards to environmental challenges. Throughout the typical 25-year design life that these guys are installed with, they're going to be exposed to some pretty extreme conditions: waves, currents, tide, the erosion around the base, depending on the conditions with the sediments, all of which are going to impact, well, and the water chemistry as well, of course. So the sort of the electrochemical impact on these structures are going to have a huge impact. The large structures, they're getting larger, and what's really important is to have a really informed and sort of intelligent approach to the sort of the distribution and installation of these sensors to ensure that you have a clear understanding of where your most vulnerable assets are. So in the early stages, before anything is installed, you're doing a site assessment to figure out where's the best place to install the various sensors, how to distribute sensors across the asset, and then it's how you use that data as well over the lifetime of the asset. What's happening to your data, because collecting it is all well and good, but if it's of poor quality, if you're not actually managing that data, and if you're not interpreting it in such a way that's going to inform your decisions, you're kind of wasting your time. So having this joined up approach to understanding your site, understanding the conditions, making sure you've got the best quality data and that you understand that it's actually being used in a meaningful way, the likelihood of you extending the life of your A asset and B, the wind farm itself, is going to, again, this will pay for itself 10 times over. Decommissioning. So the future challenges. Now, there's only a small number of sites that have been decommissioned so far. In the UK, we've had the demonstrator site up in Blythe that got taken out in 2019, but we've not actually seen anything of scale. The first round of large-scale commercial wind farms is approaching the end of its design life. Whether or not that will be able to be extended will come down to its sort of physical capability and whether or not licenses can be extended. But there is a huge round of work that's coming our way, and I think the sector needs to be prepared for this. Everything that I've touched on thus far is relevant because it's going to be a safety critical operation. Everything's going to be done in reverse order, and eventually we're going to end up with a blue water site. Should be. I've got my own opinion on that, and I think that maybe that probably needs to be discussed in some detail at a much higher level than I live at. But to return the seabed to its original form is currently where things stand. Now, to do that means that we're going to end up with blue water. So everything I've spoken about thus far needs to go in reverse order. And to maintain that continuity, that quality from the early stages in the development phase through the construction into O&M with a life extension, and then the challenges that we're going to face in decommissioning means that we have to keep absolutely sharp on quality, continuity, which will then result in safe operations. So my final slide is just a repeat of the first one. Why? I kind of hope that I've made it pretty clear. I think I've probably said the words quality and continuity too many times. Maybe you want to play this back and listen to it, or think next time don't say it so often. But it's to really, that repetition is to make a point, It's to say that if we do not have the quality of data, all of your decisions will be poorer. Thank you very much, everybody.